Hello, welcome to another Bible Story Children's Time. Today is Wednesday, July 1st. Can you believe it? We're in July already. Half of the year is gone. And here we are. And we finished off the story of Joseph the Dreamer yesterday. And if you recall, we finished the story by leaving Joseph and his descendants, or his family rather, in Egypt. And it turns out that set up the next book in the Bible, in the Old Testament. The story of Joseph is in the book of Genesis, which is the first book. The next part of the story comes in the book of Exodus, which is the second book. And it's set up by the descendants of Joseph being in Egypt. And it doesn't start out as a very pretty story. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say right now, we're going to put a PG-13 label on this. I mean, some of the other stuff we've talked about, probably should have that label too. But this one definitely PG-13 at the very beginning of the story at least. So if you are watching with a younger child, they might have some questions for you when you're done. But we'll try to keep this appropriate. So, Joseph and each of his brothers were there with their whole households. Their brothers came down with their households from Canaan, and Joseph, of course, having been sold into slavery and then basically grown up in Egypt. He went into slavery as a young man, a 17-year-old, something like that. So he had an Egyptian wife and Egyptian children. So they were all there. There were 12 of them all together, and they had their own households, their own wives, their own children. And then as they stayed in Egypt, their children grew up, married other Hebrew people, women or men, and they too had children. And Genesis tells us that the Israelites, as they're called here in the book of Exodus, the Israelites, remember they're descended from Jacob, who is also known as Israel. Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly, which means they had bunches of kids. And over the years, they got to have so many kids who then grew up to have their own children and so on over many generations. This went on for the whole period of time was around 400 years that they were in Egypt. But during this time, they increased so much in number that the Egyptian authorities started to feel that they were a threat. So the Israelites moved from being visitors to being a threat. Because they were afraid that when and if, basically it was a matter of when, Egypt went up against another kingdom in the area, which was bound to happen, that the Israelites might be enticed into siding with the other kingdom. So they could attack from within, basically. And that wasn't good. So, what Pharaoh decided is that the people had to be broken. And if they made life difficult enough for them, that perhaps they would not continue multiplying like rabbits. So the Hebrews went from being visitors to being threats, to kind of holding on to the threat part, but then they became slave labor. They were put to work doing building projects. They were put to work farming. They were put to work doing basically every dirty job that the Egyptians could find for them. And they built the cities of Pithom and Ramesses, which are called store cities, meaning this is where the Pharaoh collected his stuff. And yet, the more they were oppressed, the harder the Egyptians treated them, the more they continued to multiply. Pharaoh was starting to come to his wits' end about what to do with this problem. They worked them ruthlessly. They made them do harsh labor. You know, they were making bricks, and they were making mortar, and they were, you know, building buildings, and this was long before the times of OSHA or anything like that. So this was not only very hard work, but it was dangerous work. Their lives were bitter, and they kept multiplying. So finally, Pharaoh called for a meeting with the two Hebrew midwives. A midwife, in case you're not familiar, is a woman. Since they didn't have physicians in those days exactly, a midwife was sort of a naturalistic physician, nurse, practitioner who helped women give birth. They would help them through the labor process, maybe through the pregnancy part of it, through the aftercare part of it. They were like a combination of nurse and birth coach and all these different things. And the Hebrews at this time had two midwives, which makes you think they must have been just very, very busy, as much as the Israelites were multiplying. But Pharaoh called for the midwives who were Timon and Pumbaa. Shiphrah and Puah. And he said to them, look, when you're helping the Hebrew woman give birth, when you see them on the delivery stool was an apparatus that they sat on during the birthing process that helped support them while they were pushing and giving birth. He said, when you see them on the delivery stool and you see the baby, if the baby's a boy, I want you to kill it. And if the baby's a girl, then you can let it live. Now this was, of course, very deliberate on the part of Pharaoh to eliminate the males, at least, coming up in the population. And Shiphrah and Puah, not having a lot of choice in the matter, just said, okay, yeah, we'll do that. Whatever you say, Pharaoh. But it turns out they also feared God. And they had no intention of doing what Pharaoh told them to do. So they let boys live just as they let girls live. And when Pharaoh discovered this, he summoned the midwives and said, come on, was I not clear? Were you not watching my lips? I don't want boy babies to survive. And they said, gosh, Pharaoh, here's the thing. Hebrew women are just so vigorous that when they send for us and say that they're starting to give birth, by the time we get there, the baby's already born and he's in his mom's arms. And gosh, we can't do anything at that point, can we? And God rewarded the midwives with their own children because of their bravery in standing up to Pharaoh. That's the good news. The bad news is that because Pharaoh was frustrated and worried, he ordered that every Hebrew boy who was born must be thrown into the Nile, the big river, the river in Egypt. And once again, girls would be able to be kept alive, but the boys were going to be gator bait. Actually, croc bait. And this was a very brutal time. Now, while all this was going on, this was many generations into the time when the Hebrews, or the Israelites, the terms are interchangeable, many generations now at this point into this, their sojourn there. A certain Levi man, a man from the tribe of Levi, married a Levite woman. And she became pregnant. And as luck would have it, she gave birth to a son. And she knew what was happening to baby boys, so she hid him. She hid him for about 3 months, which had to be pretty nerve-wracking, because if somebody heard him cry and saw that he was a boy, he would have been taken away and killed. So after 3 months, she couldn't hide him anymore. So she got a papyrus basket. Papyri are reeds that grow along the Nile, a particular type of reed. And she built a basket. Or she bought a basket, I guess it looks like. And she coated it with tar and pitch to make it waterproof. And this, incidentally, if you're thinking of Noah, this is what Noah was instructed to do to the ark. He was supposed to coat it within and without with pitch and tar to make it waterproof. So what the baby's mom was doing here was creating this little mini ark. And then she put the baby in it, baby boy. And she put the basket among the reeds down on the banks of the Nile. We don't know why. We don't know if she was instructed by God to do this, or if this was just a total long shot, like I want him away, but somewhere where he could be found and maybe picked up. We're not sure why. But she did this. And then, of course, if you're familiar with the story, something miraculous happened. Now, the mother set the boy's sister to watch. It had to be an older sister, obviously. So she set her to watch, to kind of hang around there and watch and see what happened with this special basket. So Pharaoh's daughter, no name, came down to the Nile to bathe. No indoor plumbing in those days, no tubs, no hot tubs, no showers, so they would go to the river to bathe. She went down with her attendants, these young women that helped her get in the water and out of the water, probably washed her hair, helped her dry herself, all the stuff that attendants would do if you were the daughter of the Pharaoh. And they were walking along the riverbank, and she saw this basket. And she thought, well, that's odd. She pointed to one of her attendants and said, you your name. I forget your name. Go on down, grab the basket, and see what's in it. Yeah, maybe somebody lost their lunch. And the female slave went and got the basket, brought it to Pharaoh's daughter and opened it. And there was the baby. This baby boy. And he was crying. And her heart melted. And she said, well, this is one of the Hebrew babies, but he's cute. Can't let anything happen to him. And then the sister of the boy, baby, once she knew that Pharaoh's daughter had taken a shine to the baby, sister went up and said, hey, you said this was a Hebrew baby, right? So did you want me to go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? I mean, you don't want to do it yourself, right? And Pharaoh's daughter said, yeah, that's a great idea. We could do that. So go, run along. Sister went, got Mom. Mom came back, played it cool. Oh, yeah, look, yeah, looks like a Hebrew boy to me. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child, nurse him, and I will pay you. And when he is weaned, bring him back to me. So the baby's actual mom took the baby and nursed him. And when he was old enough, she took him back to Pharaoh's daughter, and Pharaoh's daughter adopted him, and she became his son. And when she adopted him, she gave him the name Moses, because it meant in their language, I drew him from the water. So that's how Moses came to be Moses. But now, how did Moses come to be this critical person to the Israelite people? We'll learn about that tomorrow when we continue the story. In the meantime, have a great afternoon. Stay healthy. And we'll see you back here at 4 o'clock.